Hello everyone and welcome to the second part of me reacting to bilingual stories on Reddit. If you haven't watched part 1, I will put a link down below. If you weren't here last time, the thread I'm reacting to is called Bilinguals of Reddit. What's your "they didn't know I spoke their language" story? Alright, grab a drink, snacks if you want, and let's get started! So CM Wolf. This happened in high school. My homeroom teacher sent me to the principal's office with some paperwork that was requested. As I walk in, I see this one guy in the principal's office, tall black dude, we'll call him Mr. J, and he's speaking fluent Spanish with the Spanish teacher. I drop off the papers with the secretary and go back to class. It's almost end of day and I'm in my English class and we have a substitute teacher, Mr. J. Well, kids being kids, no one is listening to him and one of my classmates, Millie, who's sitting on the other side of the room from me, starts bad-mouthing him in Spanish to 3 other girls. I kept telling her to shut up, but she wouldn't listen and just went on and on. The worst about this story is that she's being told to shut the hell up and she just won't. Let's carry on. He heard me to try to warn her and motioned me for me to stop, so I stopped. And that's when he began talking back to her in Spanish. I didn't say a thing and the whole class died laughing. Millie then began to yell at me for not warning her. And Mr. J told her, "She tried to warn you, but you didn't listen." She and the other girls got detention for about a week. Oh, I kind of wish I knew what they said, but kids being kids, like OP said, probably nasty stuff. IB Flow. It's a reverse of this actually. I didn't know they spoke my language. Oh, interesting perspective. I asked my mom in Vietnamese if I could have the Mexican ice cream near checkout. That shit is the best thing ever. And was begging her since she thought I had too many sweets. This older white man turns around and says, "It's pretty good ice cream," in our language. Me and my mom blankly stared at him in awe. It was the first time I've ever heard a white man speak Vietnamese. It wasn't flawless, but I could understand him. It was actually pretty freaking great. He noticed our faces and was just like, "Yeah, my wife's family does the same." That's a sweet story, I like it. Next one from a deleted user. I'm fairly tattooed and I was working in retail in a shoe shop. I was serving a very rude woman and her daughter, both of whom clearly thought they were better than me, and every time they asked for shoes they told me, in English, that I was very slow to fetch them and bad at my job. I was only on like my 3rd shift. The atmosphere turned pretty sour because obviously they were being rude and it annoyed me, and as I was boxing up the shoes they wanted, the mother turned and said to her daughter something like, "Don't ever get tattoos. This is the kind of person that has them, working in retail with absolute no brains and tattoos reflect that, blah blah blah." Wow, that's nasty. In Italian. I simply replied, "Non sono d'accordo, ma grazie. I disagree, but thank you." She looked absolutely humiliated and quickly left. I love it when these people get humiliated and embarrassed. That's all they deserve, honestly. Especially being rude to people. Like, I get that she said that in another language, but geez, you can tell when people are bitching about you in another language, you know, even if you don't understand it. So, yikes. Terrible person all round. That juice head. Okay. I live in the US. I'm first generation Romanian American. Born here to immigrant parents, spoke Romanian at home, that sort of thing. Was out in public not too long ago and an older couple started making rude comments about my outward physical appearance. Specifically my tattoos and muscles. The look of fear when I turned around and responded to them was priceless. I don't know, I've never been to the US, but I'm kind of assuming that, yes, of course, I know that there's this cliche of American people not being able to speak any other language but English, but at the same time, I always see like the US as a melting pot of people with lots of, well, tourists for one, but also immigration, so I don't feel like that would be the place where I would speak, you know, other languages but English and hope that people won't understand me. But, you know, that's just me, I guess. Hometown Gypsy. I don't really have that good of a story, but the faces were pretty funny. I studied abroad and got a minor in Spanish, so I can understand most spoken Spanish and definitely understand it when reading. I'm just very slow at speaking at this point since I'm so out of practice. I can totally relate. A couple of weeks ago at work, I was warming up my breakfast when I hear 2 women speaking to each other. In Spanish, that they needed to call maintenance because the coffee machine was broken. Without really thinking, I said, but in English, "It's not broken, it just needs a new filter. That's what the error message said." and they both just stared at me. That's cute. Something similar happened at my house when I was having a pest control treatment done. Two of the workers were talking to each other in Spanish and I heard them say, "I can't find the attic stairs." So I said, "Oh, they're right there." And then when I walked away, I heard them discussing if I spoke Spanish or not. I did usually keep that under wraps so I'd be able to hear what people were saying when working on my home. Smart. I like to know the truth, and a lot of times people thinking I don't speak their language is a good way to get that. I live in Texas, so 95% of day laborers will speak Spanish. It's handy to understand what's being said. I can relate because in some situations I don't like to tell people or like show people that I can understand other languages in the hope to catch them saying something mean about me or about someone else. I don't know. It's never really happened, I don't think, but I'm here for it in case it happens. Next one, bitch tarts. Oh, those names, I swear. Happens to me on the regular. I'm a white person with red hair and green eyes who lives in Japan and works as a translator. Ooh, another Japanese story. I fit the definition of ultra gaijin. So folks think they can just say whatever they want around me, especially since a lot of people subscribe to the silly stereotype that Japanese is just so hard and impossible for foreigners to learn. I remember when I was an exchange student in uni in Tokyo, I was going around a bunch of circles during Club Fair week to see what was worth joining. One was a conversation club for English, which really pushed foreigners to join and had people constantly smiling and promising friendships and lots of fun get-togethers. I didn't really know anyone in the uni, so I went to their first dinner get-together just so I could make friends. I joined a table with a really gangly white girl who didn't speak any Japanese, and the club senior at our table would compliment her and act super friendly, but then would turn to each other and, still all smiles, talk shit about how freakish she looked or how she smelled awful. Wow, that's pretty nasty. I was speaking in English the whole night and sat right next to the girl. Towards the end, when they really started going off, I just turned to them and said, "Oh hey, so what you guys talking about?" in Japanese. The color completely drained from their faces. They just laughed awkwardly and stopped talking among each other for the rest of the night. I didn't tell the girl anything. That's kind of nice, I guess, to kind of preserve her, but convinced her the club was lame and we both ended up joining a dance group instead. I don't get these people. Like, if it was in the US, or like another country outside of Japan, I could have understood that they would assume people don't speak Japanese. Although, don't do that, we've learned our lesson by now. But in Tokyo, at university, where it's very likely that even foreigners will speak some Japanese or are learning Japanese, I don't get it. Honestly, I do not get it. Brutus the Retriever. I am an Indian who is fluent in Mandarin and was at a local poker game where two Chinese lads were talking shit about me as I had won some money off of them. Lad A spoke to his pal in Mandarin. "Watch me wrecked this noob by bluffing his ass off, and I'm gonna show him the bluff when he folds." It was a rather big pot for me, $1,000 plus, as I was only 18 back then, and I put on a show for him with the size and massive tanking to get him to sweat it out before I made the call with a single pair to take the pot down. He was extremely frustrated and sarcastically told me that I made a next level call. The game ended 2 hours later with the winning over $2,000 and he was the main contributor. It took every shred of discipline not to rub it in his face that I spoke Mandarin, as I wanted to shear this sheep over and over again, which I did over the next few months. Thanks, Mr. Whaler. That's pretty, I don't know, that's quite a lot of money involved, but also karma. 100% karma. Definitely deserved. Kokak XD, I was playing chess with some guy and he was talking to a friend. My opponent starts talking to his friend in French, which I can understand. He was saying stuff like, "My opponent sucks, I'm gonna easily beat him." It was pretty amusing watching him criticize me and then I still beat him. He was pretty bad, but so was I back then. I told him I understand French after I beat him. Sometimes French people are so embarrassing, like they think no one speaks French. It's one of the most spoken languages in the world, you know, in the top 10, so what are you doing? Don't do that. Run 3R. I'm gonna go with that pronunciation. When I was in Seoul, I had a hat made that says which literally means white person in Korean. After leaving that shop, I went to the bus stop where an old Korean man noticed my hat and was just openly chuckling and enjoying its humor. He even got his equally old friend's attention to point out that someone had tricked the silly white boy to buy a hat that labeled him as a gringo. Then my bus pulls up, and just before getting on, I turn to them and say, "What the hat says is true, isn't it?" And the 180-degree change in their facial expressions was fantastic. I've got a similar thing. I've got this hat, hold on. So yeah, I've got this hat in Japanese, which is a Kansai dialect or Osaka dialect, I'm not sure. And I think it reads Hishinopachi maybe. And it means desperate, try hard. And it's obviously on purpose, and I knew that when I bought it because I could tell it was too random. It was not like a typical I love Japan kind of hat, so I asked my friend and she confirmed. But yeah, I love that, and I'm dying to wear it when I go back to Japan or maybe out in Paris, just so I can get people's reactions, and yeah, that'd be funny. Yeah, I need new hobbies. Alright, so this one is from a deleted user. I'm not a native German speaker, but I've worked in Germany, so my German is pretty good. I was out with some friends and they were sitting behind us in the McDonald's. They were gossiping about the boys in their group and their plans to try and get to their rooms later that night. Ugh. I'm guessing they were there on a school trip. One girl was rather descriptive in what she wanted to do to one of the boys. Awkward. When we left, I turned to them and said, "Viel Spaß dabei." Yeah, I can't speak German. Have fun with that. She literally crawled under the table. That's funny. I've got a similar story which I told on my channel years ago. Maybe it was in my first 10 videos, 8 years ago. Not me being an oldie on YouTube. Anyway, so there was this Portuguese girl on the bus when I was in Brighton. And in Brighton, there aren't many Portuguese people or Portuguese speakers in general. But there was this girl sitting across from me on the bus. You know, there was like the 4 seats, you know, like 2 facing each other. And she was on the phone with a guy, and she was going on and on and on about the crazy, you know, cheeky night, let's say, she had with a guy from the night before to a friend of hers. And it was really detailed. A part of me wanted to kind of expose her or like pretend to get a phone call in Portuguese with my family. But at the same time, I think she would have been very embarrassed, and I didn't want her to feel embarrassed. I tried really hard not to laugh, and I don't think she noticed I could understand what she was saying, but that was pretty funny. KLWK, I was working summers during college on an assembly line, and there were a lot of Puerto Ricans, is that how you say that in English? And Dominicans working in the same factory. I had gotten to be pretty good at speaking and understanding Spanish in my high school classes. One day, one of the mechanics was telling a story to a couple of the women working on the same line I was working on, and the story was funny, so I laughed. All of them turned around and stared at me in shock. When they confirmed that, yes, I did understand Spanish, the mechanic looked at the others and said, "Wow, we better watch what we say around her from now on." Yes, dude, I did hear all the other comments about the college students the last few weeks and understood which ones of us you thought were more attractive than the others. It's been decades, so my Spanish is not nearly as good now, but I'm working on that. Well... Carmila Wu, Brit living in the Netherlands, was on holiday back in England. 2 Dutch girls around 19, same age as me at the time, were queuing to pay for their shopping. I was in front of them with like maybe twice their items as I was doing chores for my grandparents, cause they are nice enough to put a roof above my head for the holidays. Good for her. The girls start talking about how rude I am for being in front of them with more shopping, how a short like me can't carry all that shopping anyway. Then they start talking about Brits in general, calling us ugly and stupid. So I just turned to face them, smiled and said, "Have a nice day," in Dutch, and all color drained from their faces. Do Dutch people look a specific way? I guess they would look kind of very white and blonde maybe, and maybe that British person wasn't, I don't know. But that's kind of bold to assume someone doesn't speak Dutch just by looking at them. I don't know, that's kind of like a thing in Paris where I had a friend asking me, you know, how do you know someone is from Paris? And the answer is that I have no idea. Like, I don't know. Maybe the way they walk can kind of give it away, or their behavior. Obviously, if they're being touristy, like looking at the monuments in awe, it's kind of a dead giveaway. But otherwise, I can't really tell unless I hear them. But I don't know, that's pretty ballsy to do that in public and not expect any consequences. Then, after I paid for my items, I said, "Sorry it took so long, nice hair," again in Dutch. She genuinely had nice hair. I've never seen someone look so damn ashamed of themselves. Deserved. Anywho, it took me a while to get home because the bags were heavy, and one of the girls came up to me and apologized and thanked me for not getting angry with her, put a chocolate bar in my shopping and left. Oh, I like that. Good for her. I once again said, "Have a nice day" in Dutch. She cringed, but after I laughed at her reaction, she laughed it off and we went our separate ways. I like this story, honestly. I mean, the best thing you can do is apologize, but I think it's really sweet that she put a chocolate bar in the shopping bag. I think it's cute. Alright, let's have a last one for this video. So, the SAS meme, me, multilingual, they did not know it. Company I worked for bought a company in Canada. Montreal specifically, back in the telecom days. Nobody on our side had done any due diligence. I was sent up to evaluate the effort level of integrating the two systems. The board company is wonderfully diverse and multinational. I'm sitting in the middle of the conference room after getting the standard architecture slide deck and start asking the tough questions. Without boring you with the details, folks to my left start talking in Arabic about all the work they'd have to do to get us an interface. The folks on my right started talking in French about all the back-end work they'd have to do to make a viable product. I let the conversation develop for a while. The big boss finally gets the meeting back under control and starts spinning some BS about how, I think, we'd be ready for interface shortly. I stopped him. I repeated exactly what both teams said and expressed that given what I just heard, there was no way any of the integration would be feasible within any kind of reasonable time frame. There was deathly silence. Finally, the big boss says in English, "Well guys, I think we're going to have to find a language that this guy doesn't know if we're going to have private conversation." That's a really good response. As it happens, as it goes, we never did get their stuff integrated. Both companies eventually tanked. Oh, ends badly, but I like the story anyway. Alright, so thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, if you enjoyed it, let me know. I'm thinking of doing more of that kind of video in the future because that's pretty funny and I love me a bilingual story, you know. And on this note, I will leave you to it and I will see you later. Bye!